Hey there. So, we're going to make a fun rolling video tonight. Just a little bit of muscle therapy. When we think about sore muscles, we think about stretching usually post-exercise to make everything feel better. But one other method is foam rolling. It's essentially a deep tissue massage, but you're using an object instead of someone's hands. So when we work out, our muscles become tight and bunched up, and that knot of muscle is called a trigger point. So there's different ways to release the trigger point, to bring that muscle back to its natural striated pattern. And this is one way. So I'm going to show you some of the main areas that we like to hit with the roller. And then also some of the precautions you want to take, because you don't want to overload. You want to be careful about your joints. And you want to also be careful about blood vessels in the lower body. So over-rolling can cause varicose veins. Varicose veins can contribute to things like stroke and also, honestly, just unsightliness. They're very, very visible. But when we are getting down onto our foam roll, you want to place it on the ground. A lot of people like to combine core and yoga with their foam rolling. So we'll do a little bit of that today. I'm going to have you find a cat-cow with your roller just right in between your knees and your palms. Good. And here in cat-cow, we're going to gently come forward. And from that kneeling position, bring those thighs down to your roll. Resting down onto the forearms. We're going to come forward. Good. And we're just getting our quads here on the top of the thigh. You want to be mindful of that kneecap. So you're rolling to about 2 inches above that knee. Good, and then gently coming back up. Now something else to think about with your foam rolling is the more pressure you put upon the roller, the more intense it's going to be, because it is scar tissue. So it's going to be painful, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable when you're rolling, especially if this is your first time and you're tight. So double leg or double, anything is always going to be a little bit less pressure. Single arm, single leg, whatever you're rolling is going to be more. So I'm going to roll out just to one side and get one quad. And yes, I definitely feel that a little bit more. As long as you're supported in the hands when you're rolling, you can do all kinds of things on your roll. I kind of like to make it into a nice little flow here. So I'm getting my quad. And from quad, you're rolling up into your hip flexor. And you'll find that hip flexor right above the hip bone. And it'll probably feel like a point of tightness. Maybe you'll feel that little ooh, and that is your hip flexor, because generally we're very tight in the hips. Hip flexors, anything that we're doing with our lower body, walking or any cardio of any kind, squatting, there's a lot of hip flexor going on there. So spend a little bit of time on your hips. You can roll back and forth. This is called spanning. Good, and I'm going to switch over now to the other side, rolling up into that hip flexor and gently back and forth. And you do want to be very careful with the hip flexor. It's a delicate muscle. And there's two schools of thought on, whether there's actual emotion tied to messing with that hip flexor. I find that the best practice is just be careful in general. So. Everything in the body is connected. If we mess one piece up, then another piece is going to have to compensate for it, and in doing that, will become messed up itself. So treat everything with care. All right, so now we're coming down to the glutes. So with the glutes, I have a half roll here, and I have wide hips. And so I'm not able to get both glutes at one time. If you have a full roller, you're able to definitely sit and get both at the same time. But I'm going to do single leg here. What I like to do is turn it into a reverse plank. So I'm here and lowering those hips down. Right side here. Well, when you're standing, and that is just that rolling back and forth across the muscle, I like to roll up and down 3 times across the muscle, and then find the center and stand back and forth. That 3 times up and down is generally enough to activate, wake everything up, bring everything to a more accessible place. And then you can stand back and forth. When I say a more accessible place, I just mean activated. So after exercise is a great time to foam roll because all of your muscles are awake, everything is warm. All right, so from our glutes, we are going to come down to the hamstrings. Now, if you have a desk job, your hamstrings are probably very tight. From a lifetime of not stretching glutes properly, not activating glutes properly, they're usually a little bit messed up. But when you sit at a desk, you're not activating at all. So the thing that will be tight is probably your hamstrings and your hip flexors. When we sit in this position here, the hamstrings are shortened. You're not getting any extension in that knee, and so they remain here and they shorten and tighten. The hip flexors are here. They're not getting any extension when you're seated in a chair, so they shorten and they tighten. And then when we stand up, especially quickly, that can cause all kinds of, problems in the lower back. The lower back doesn't get activated as much when you're seated, so it's not very strong. So those tight hips are going to pull, the tight hamstrings are going to pull, and so it's getting pulled to the front and simultaneously beneath itself. It's hard. It's definitely a tricky thing. So what you want to do is make sure that you stretch your hip flexors, you stretch your hamstrings at least once a day if you sit at a desk, for more than a couple of hours. So from hamstrings, we're going to move down into our calves. Now, I suffer from plantar fasciitis, and what that is all of the muscles on the bottom of the foot become tight, and the fascia gets pulled up, especially when we have tight calves. So calves are kind of like the hip flexors, where if we do anything with our lower body, they will be active. And so they become pretty tight and can cause all kinds of problems, in that way. If you suffer from shin splints, if you're prone to that when you, increase your cardiovascular activity, that is because this little tibialis muscle on the front here gets pulled around to the big gastroc and the soleus. They just overpower everything. So we roll them and we stretch them. A combination of both is usually best. I definitely don't recommend just foam rolling and no stretching, or just stretching and no foam rolling. I think do a little bit of both. And honestly, if you're uncomfortable on this roll because your muscles are tight, do more stretching, and then your muscles will be a little bit looser and it won't be as uncomfortable when you're trying to, get that deep tissue massage on your foam roller. So with your calves, spanning is a great option here. Now personally, I have been foam rolling for a very long time, so I do like to do everything with one leg. I like that extra pressure. So that's what spanning would look like with one leg, but if you're doing both, you just rest them down, back and forth. One benefit to foam rolling is that you really can, without even trying, get a pretty good core workout, pretty good stretch workout too, because here you see as my calves are elevated off the ground, it makes stretching forward over the toes a little bit easier, a little bit more accessible. Oh, the beautiful stretch in the calf. And now bring it back. So that brings me to talking about this foam roller in particular is a vibrating one. So I press a little button on the side and then there's settings. Now vibration is amazing for muscle therapy. I don't know if you've ever seen those Theraguns, but what vibration will do is it stimulates blood flow to an area. So if you're sore, you've got anything going on like that, then it's going to induce healing in that way. So combine that with the deep tissue qualities of the foam roller and you're really set up quite well. We haven't gone up into the back yet, so we're going to do that, and we're going to do that very, very carefully. So what you're going to do is you're going to gently step forward, cradling the head and neck, and roll down. Then gently up, and down, and gently up. Good. Now when you're rolling the back, sorry, this roller definitely makes my voice go a little bit crazy. I'm going to turn it down. There we go. When you're rolling into the back, you want to think about finding the thoracic, the thoracic spine, that mid-back, up into the shoulder blades, and then you do what's called a windshield wiper. And what this does is you're just kind of finding extra spots, little trigger points, and you're massaging out that muscle. Good. And that brings me to our cervical spine. You want to be very, very careful. I would not recommend any vibration on the roll when you do this area, and I would also not recommend elevating the hips. I think that with this area, we definitely want to just be very mindful. So you're going to rest your shoulder blades down onto the mat, and you're just going to let your neck round out over the roll. Now, if your roll is firm enough, this should be enough. You can gently shake your head no. Good. If you've ever been, to a chiropractic or a physical therapist and they place their thumbs at the base of your skull and you press, and you feel kind of a release, that's your sub-occipital muscles, and they become very, very tight when you're sitting at a desk and you round, you jut your chin forward. It's a lot of stress right there. So that is why it's really nice to massage that area out, ease some of that tension. And what I like to do here is gently shrug my shoulders up and release, and shrug up and release, and then you feel that medial deltoid on the top of the shoulder, kind of getting a nice little massage. You can kind of shimmy here. Good. All right, now coming up to seated, a few things that you can do to get into, you can get your lats and then you can get your pec. Harder to isolate the pec, but what I like to do is place it snugly into my armpit and then wrap and press. And you're just gently pressing. You'll feel the pec, both, parts of it here as you roll inward. And with this vibrating foam roller, it's wonderful. You just press that vibration setting on and you hug it. Now when you're using the vibration, wait about 30 seconds until you feel the itch. You're going to feel this itch, and that's the fluid flowing to the area. That's when you know you got it. You can move on to the next space. Now if you wanted to get your lats, you're going to take it and you're going to lay your armpits on top of the roller. And you're just going to rest right here. I like to bend the bottom knee and brace that top foot, and then you're just gently coming up an inch and down an inch. And you're going to feel it, definitely. You can get up into the shoulder. Being very careful, though, with the shoulder. Little rotator cuff muscles. You want to be very mindful of that area. And again, pairing stretches for each body part with the foam rolling that you're doing is an excellent combination. You can kind of get a one-stop shop. But that is some foam rolling, just some beginner stuff, part one. So have a really good night, and thank you.